So one of the first important things to understand is this course is based on using Revit mostly as the BIM modeler, Building Information Modeler. It's the primary software that architects use to communicate their ideas, whether through visualization of 3D or through creation of construction documents. And then really on top of that, so much more about the process of architecture. And so how do we get to that? Luckily, as a student of Alfred or a student of any program in the educational system, Autodesk provides free software for that. And the process today currently is typically done by downloading that software directly from the Autodesk site. This is the way I recommend doing it. There are some other ways that are within the university system or the college system. One of the problems with that is access to the software once you're off campus. So the easiest thing to do is to go to Autodesk Revit Student. These are the Google words I used. And then the first thing that'll come up is Autodesk Education and Student Access. Hopefully you'll get to something like that. At any point, what should end up happening is you should get to a start screen that looks somewhat similar to this. And then you click on the Get Started, and there is also a little video here that will kind of like walk you through the process. And the idea is that you have to provide your identification as being an Alfred student, and then relatively shortly they will confirm that and grant you a license for the use of your software. And I believe you can go ahead and start getting that downloaded right away. And then once you're in there, you just sign in and can start using the software. Well, once again, if you're having problems with this, don't panic, because there are labs available to do projects until you get things straightened out. There's also a great resource which is called our help desk, you can actually, I think if you just type in help, it'll go to help. In your email software, it'll take you to a link to the help desk, and you can ask for questions. And/or it is in the Hinckley Library on the downstairs floor or on the basement level, so you can actually physically walk over there if you're having problems. And I'm also a resource if you're having problems. This screen is actually incorrect. I want to change this. We're going to be using Revit 2023 this year, and maybe I'll take a second to change that. So hold on. I'll put it on pause. There we go, through the miracle of pause. I've updated it to the Revit 2023 screen. You can work in older versions. There really probably shouldn't be any problem with it. I really encourage you to be in the most up-to-date and kind of stay in the most up-to-date. There are always new features coming along. Sometimes students are hesitant to upgrade to new versions because they think it's going to cause them problems with their computers. I've typically found very few problems or issues with staying current and updating all the time. So if you're out of the gate, please upgrade to 2023. I'm basing all of the videos on the interface of Revit 2023. There aren't a whole lot of changes, but it could be problematic with really older versions. So a little run through, kind of like this kind of opening kind of introduction to, I guess, some of the underlying principles of this course. My goal, one of the ways I want to say it, is to communicate compelling ideas quickly. I think that's really the goal of this course. Obviously to make good construction document details, but you're going to learn more about that in other courses. But really the idea of using these modelers, especially these BIM modelers, which we'll explain more about in coming lectures, to be able to use them quickly so that if you have an idea, as quickly or quicker than you could actually sketch the ideas out, you can actually draw them in three-dimensional space and start to work with the ideas and mold and model them. And that's typically been contrary to the way most people conceive using software. They usually think that, well, if I can pick up a pen and paper, I can explain the idea quicker. But because architecture is such a complex process with so many important details in it, sometimes we just, as we become experienced with modeling, we know that we can communicate these important concepts as quickly or even more effectively by doing them and working in model space. At least that's one of the premises of what this course is trying to offer you. And we're always in this kind of evolution of the technology. And so the three dots that are together, this is how it would have been presented last year, and this fourth dot, and there'll be a fifth dot, and so on as the course evolves or as architecture evolves and technology evolves. We start out with the idea of people working at drafting tables, mostly a male-dominated profession, hand drawing our concepts and ideas and working through documents in a really quite a tedious way. then the next one is the kind of advent of the computer, but the idea that there's a specialist who knows how to operate the computer, with somebody who has architectural expertise directing that person to use that high-tech piece of equipment. And now we know that no longer happens. The person who is the designer is the manipulator of the software. And then we're obviously moving into this idea of virtual reality. Our models are very compelling and accurate. And so our experience with our designs before they've actually become concrete are rapidly changing. But now, just recently, there are many really paradigm-shifting ideas about what's happening with this last idea and the idea of artificial intelligence, how other agents of software tools can help us in the design process. So that leaves this course and all courses in architecture to constantly evolve and speak to the new incoming technology. But I have to make a determination about what this course should be made of. And when I started with this many years ago, we were teaching software like SketchUp as a way of creating models in digital space. And I mostly abandoned that. And so this is an older slide that I presented showing how, firms' adoption of technology and critical issues about it. And this is a recent survey report, and this idea of moving to BIM, which is building information modeling, it's just a way of keeping track of all of the processes within the architectural design envelope, so to speak, how that's changed over the years. So if we were to look back, to years when I started teaching, the adoption of BIM software was much lower than it is today. Now, almost 100%, actually 100% of all firms, large firms, use BIM on all of their billable projects. And with obviously a huge proportion of 10 to 49 employee firms using it also, which really encapsulates a huge swath of the amount of architectural opportunity for jobs that lays out in front of you. But then there's the idea of these smaller firms under 10 employees, and these could be sole proprietors who aren't using the software or are using it in very limited ways. So I'm using this concept to really, or using this data, so to speak, to justify the idea of utilizing BIM in this really entire course. And not looking at other kinds of software that might be available. And that's an open dialogue, and I hope to have that with you as we go forward. It's not to say we wouldn't use other software. There's many other kind of modeling software that's available, but many of those today now have plugins to the BIM environment. And so I hope this course makes a compelling argument for why we're going to focus mostly on building information modeling software. And Revit, of course, is the premier one of that, which I'll explain more as we go along. So here's an idea of what architects do and use BIM for: design visualization, the idea of creating digital models, presentations and renderings, construction documents, sharing our models with other people who are in the process of helping us make our buildings, structural engineers, heating and ventilation contractors, plumbing, etc. And then sharing our ideas with other people like our clients and other owners of the building. And so on. And more of this will be explained as we move forward. And so, the final statement on that is building information modeling based software opens the best environment for learning, school, and experience for practice. There is some issues about this idea about limits of what building information modeling does as far as hampering the creativity of architects in general. And I think that's part of an active and important dialogue that we'll have during this course. I kind of wanted to set the idea, the tone of why, of how the school or academic environment differs from the real work environment. In architecture school, and architects in general, go through this process, really kind of a 5-step process from, identifying a client and a project and going through what's called a schematic design phase, concept drawings, ideas about what the scope of the work will be, schematic design of the layout, and then we go into design development, which is to start to refine things, create accurate delineations of walls, what surfaces are covered with, square footage, construction details. And then we move into the final process of really the drawing, and that's the creation of construction documents, and those are highly detailed documents. And you'll notice they take up 45% of the time that architects spend. The point I want to make is through our architecture school, we're going to spend most of our time in this idea of schematic design and design development, and we're going to spend very limited amounts of time in the generation of construction documents. One of the important parts of that, though, is that BIM modeling can really help to prepare you for when you get out into the real world, because by working in the platform of building information modeling, you're already well along in the ability to create construction documents. And as we go through the modules that are going forward, you'll get a better understanding of what I mean by that. So here is just another illustration about going from schematic design, where we have sketches, to design development, where things actually start to look real, but are limited with the amount of information that is communicated to people on how to build a building, which is that third image, that construction document image. This has nothing to do with architecture, but our ability to learn something like software, and to a point where it becomes second nature to us. And so science says it takes this long to form a habit. And the idea here is, on average, it takes 66 days for a new behavior to become a habit. I think that's kind of an interesting concept, because it's really, it fits well within the idea of a semester of school and the kind of modules that we've laid out for us. So I hope that even though we go through some of these projects may seem very tedious for you, especially those of you who are coming transferring in and having to take this course, but you'll find that you're really developing or starting to develop really good techniques for modeling. This is a video. I'm going to play this in a separate clip. This is what an architect really does during the day, and I just think it's very just very useful for us to gain a little perspective about where we sit with what we're going to learn in this course, with what happens in the real world for architects.